Thanks for joining us again. I'm Kevin Flynn, President of CVR. We appreciate you taking the time and your interest in this topic. Obviously, we're all in a situation that we've never been in before, and we're forced to make decisions that we haven't faced, and everyone's afraid to make the wrong decision or a decision that might impact our employees or our brand in a way that is long-lasting past this crisis. So we felt it would be helpful to our clients and friends and partners and folks at the agency, many of whom are on, to kind of hear from an expert in this field. So I'd like to welcome Phil Powell, who we met a while ago when he was chair of the full-time and online MBA program in Bloomington at IU. And Phil is now Associate Dean of Academic Programs and a Clinical Associate Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy at IU Kelley School of Business in Indianapolis. We've known Phil for a while, and he's done a great job leading the Kelley School in various assets, and we're very excited to have him today and learn from him today. So I'm going to turn the podium over to Phil, as they say, virtually, and stop sharing my screen, and I will let you take it away and share your screen, Phil. Thanks for joining us today.
Sure, Kevin, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to work with you. CVR has been a close partner of the Kelley School on both campuses. We really appreciate your services and your wisdom on how we make ourselves visible to the market, as I'm sure all the audience is. It's a shame that we have to come together under these circumstances, but I know all of you are dealing with questions of uncertainty. Where are we headed with the public health threat? Where are we headed with business? When can we think about getting out of this? How do I communicate down to my team? How do I lead? How do I keep myself sane? So Kevin asked me last week if I would jump in and offer some insights from the Kelley School, and happy to be here. So I'm gonna, just to give you a little preview here, I'm gonna give you about 20 minutes, 25 minutes of my most current material on this and thoughts. As you know, this situation is very fluid, and the thoughts and insights I was offering and our faculty were offering 2 weeks ago seems like a world away now. But I'm going to keep this practical. I'm not going to put on my academic hat and cite a lot of studies. I'm just going to give you my best read of management best practice as we teach our students in the Kelley School. So I hope you find this valuable. Again, I'm going to try to stay grounded and give you actionable advice that will help you after this session even engage these struggles and challenges with a little bit more, feel a little bit stronger with that. So let me share my screen here. Hopefully everyone can see it. If you can't see it, please let me know. But this is a challenge of a generation. The challenge that we're facing now is tantamount to what we faced with the wars that we fought as a nation, 9/11, and we're going to come out on the other end of this a changed community, and in many ways for the better, but it will be on the backs of a lot of pain and a lot of stress and a lot of unfortunate loss of life. But we've got to get through it, and that's what I want to talk about today. And my button here. So before I go into this, let me sort of put my economist cap on and offer give you some perspective on what we're dealing with here, which I think is important. And how do we, what does the science of economics tell us about what we're facing? The way I look at, again, sort of going into economist mode here, when I look at this and try to put my arms around this and run the numbers, what we're seeing here is a very unique contraction of the economy. Usually, economic recessions are driven by a pullback of business spending, whether it's because equities have been overvalued, or there is irrational exuberance, as we've heard the term since the 90s, or just sort of the business cycle. Usually it's businesses that lead us into recession because they pull back on their spending, and then households follow. This is the opposite. Households are the one pulling back. They can't go to restaurants. You can't go out. We can't conduct commerce. When we can't conduct commerce, we can't generate economic value. And that's what drives our economy. That's what drives employment. So we have a situation where we've got, it's not about misalignment in the financial markets. It's about business. It's about households pulling back, and then that will impact businesses. So, and that's very different from what we saw in 2008 and 1929, where it was led by the corporate sector, misalignment in business decisions. This is really about, the best way I summarize it is an overnight fall in consumer spending of about 20 to 25%. What I've shared with you here is a pie chart of how the average US household spends their money. And I sort of sat down and asked myself, in this period, where would we see households pulling back? And then what would be the total drawback on that? And when you run the numbers, which I'm not going to go through, we're looking at that this 20 to 25% retrenchment in consumer spending will lead to about a 24 to 30% fall in overall economic activity. Now, that's and a loss of 19 to 24 million jobs. But the good news is that's before the stimulus. The stimulus is going to bring back, is going to close up at least 60 to 70% of this gap over the next 6 months. And that will leave us with not the catastrophe here, but it will leave us at probably an unemployment rate of between 7 and 9% before, when we're sort of in this crawl out mode. What I see, to the best of my read of the numbers and the patterns, we're looking at 3 months of absolute paralysis, followed by 3 months of a slow crawl out. China has just entered this phase, slow crawl out, and that's about 6 months. So that takes us from an economics perspective to about, September, October, where we're just now ready to recover in a normal fashion. And so when we get there, we're looking at being about between 7 and 9% unemployment, which is a little bit better than 2000, when 2008 hit bottom. In 2008, we had about 10% unemployment. And then, but the recovery after that period, the recovery after the crawl out will be quite rapid. And that's good news. Now, this assumes no second big outbreak in the fall. I'm assuming that we might have some small outbreaks, but we'll be able to manage those. I'm assuming no second pullback, which is still a big risk. But if we just have this period of paralysis and that's able to contain the disease so that we can sort of return to normal and conduct commerce, that's what we're looking at. Now, the worst is yet to come. We could dip toward unemployment rates of between 15 and 20% in the next 3 months, but the recovery package is going to bounce that back up pretty quick. And so we're going to see a nice steady uptick from the stimulus, and then we'll enter normal recovery mode after about 6 months. So that's a time frame that I'm looking at as I offer the following advice. And I promise you the rest of these slides are not economic data, but I want to give you a sense of the scale. This is probably the most painful 6 months we're going to have economically since the Great Depression. But the good news is that we will recover quickly, and it will not be a depression. In the early 1930s, we did not have a social safety net. We did not have fiscal stimulus. We did not have a Federal Reserve that would respond with lower interest rates. In fact, it responded with higher interest rates. We did not have the federal FDIC to ensure our bank deposits. So when people ask me, are we going to a Great Depression? The answer is no. So I think that's important to erase from perhaps your team members' minds. It's going to be short and very painful. It's going to be acute, but we're going to get out of this. And the experience of nations ahead of us in the disease cycle instill confidence, and just what we know about economic science tells us that also. And so when it comes down to it, what I'm telling businesses and what our faculty are telling businesses, this is about survival. How do you go how do you get on the other side of this solvent, or to have your business units solvent and ready to ride the wave of a recovery that will come pretty quick? And that recovery will come quickly because, again, this retrenchment is caused by a public health crisis, not by a financial crisis on Wall Street. And that's important to remember. So from a leadership perspective, in a crisis, I'm going to break this down to what you should be doing and what you should be telling your leaders, and then what your business unit should be doing from a decision-making perspective. And again, I'm going to keep this very practical and very, very actionable. And I'm not going to go into a lot of the psychological theories and literature. We don't have time for that. If you want some of that, let me know, and I will be happy to engage with you. And this is the same advice I'm following, and that is you have to center yourself. That's the most important. You've got to figure out how, with all these things that you can't control, how do you center yourself so that you can focus? And again, this is about survival. Each day we wake up and we're healthy, and each day that we wake up and our business unit is solvent, it may not be selling anything, but as long as you can still be open for business and you're solvent and not bankrupt, that's a day to be thankful. And I think, gratitude, human happiness, when you look at the brain chemicals in the brain, they talk about human happiness is about relationships, experiences, and gratitude. And while the experiences may be on hold for right now because we're stuck quarantined in our houses, we can rely on relationships and gratitude. And focusing this is about survival. And so if that just becomes the goal, in most circumstances, that seems doable. And that sets the bar at something that can be achieved. So if you center yourself, that means that you have to be a rock in the storm. It's what you signed up for as a leader. It's the burden that you carry. You have to position yourself to be there. And so what does that mean? Think of the 4 C's. You've got to be calm. You've got to project calm. You have to project confidence. That doesn't mean you project ego. There's a difference between ego and confidence. You want to project confidence. You can project confidence and still be humble. You want to be calm. You want to project confidence. You want to be collected, which means you have the right information. You want the decisions that you make and you want the facts that you share to be based on data and objective understanding and frameworks. That's going to be a key to survival right now. While we want to express emotional empathy, which I'll talk about, we still want to make sure our decisions are based on reason and objectivity. So calm, confident, collected, which means you have the right information, and clear. This is where CVR can be helpful. How do you communicate in a way that threads the needle on being honest with your team about bad news, but also being empathetic and positive? It's still possible to deliver bad news, but to do it in a positive way. News, there's facts. Facts can be celebrated. Facts can be cause us sadness, but they can still be delivered in a way that's positive. So I think it's important to make that break. Facts are facts. They might be good news or bad news, but you have a choice in how you deliver that, and you want to opt for positive psychology on that. And we know, the literature knows, that our best leaders, the leaders that people respond to in a crisis, are stubborn optimists. They paint the picture of what is realistically achievable when everybody else is despondent. But that's what people rally to. That's what you want to be. Now, again, though, it's about centering yourself and some mental discipline, right? Rock in the storm is what we aspire to. That's what our people are looking for us to be. That's difficult. Calmness, confidence, collectivity, and clarity are the essence of what it means to be the rock in the storm. But in order to achieve that, in order to live up to that aspiration of being an effective leader during these challenging times, you have to have your own mental discipline. And it's hardest to be disciplined right now when we have the biggest challenges. We don't know. We have the least certainty. So turn off the news. Stay off social media as much as you can. Obviously, use social media to connect, but don't be thumbing through your Facebook to look at the news. If you want to track this crisis, the most objective way to do that is to track the data on new cases and, unfortunately, on the death rate. And if you go to, there's a couple of websites you can go to track the daily numbers. And what you want to do is you want to track when things are going to peak. And that's going to give us, and look at the patterns. Right now, I'm personally, as an analytics person, I'm looking at Europe, and I'm looking at that daily data as an indication of how far we're going to go, because there's good reason to believe epidemiologically that we are about 3 to 4 weeks behind Europe. So, and we've got enough data now that our own public health officials in the United States are modeling these things. And that, looking at the data, is devoid of the emotional, almost emotional garbage is a term I feel like sometimes, but the emotional manipulation of the media, whether you're on the left or the right, whatever the perspective is. You want to avoid that manipulation. So if you want to track it, follow the data. The worldometer.info is a site I go to. I also know that Johns Hopkins has a good data site. But why are you doing this? I mean, you got to understand what's going on in the outside world and track that, but you want to minimize that because you have to compartmentalize. You're in a battle. All of our businesses are in a battle for survival. Good military leaders on the field compartmentalize, and they focus, and they filter out the noise that's in other parts of the battlefield, because that's the only way they can achieve objectives. Same thing has to happen here. You've got to filter out all the noise that's coming through the news, because otherwise you're going to be completely overwhelmed and you won't be able to focus. And if you can't focus, then your whole team's not going to be able to focus, because again, they're looking to you to be the rock in the storm. So you've got to have that mental discipline to compartmentalize your focus. If you have to look at the news, if you want to look at the data, as a leader, budget certain time of the day, maybe between 5 and 6 o'clock, where you allow yourself to go wild and read the media. But have a beginning and an end time, and that's the only time you look at it. It'd be the equivalent of a sergeant who's supposed to see his battalion move forward, looking at what everybody else is doing and listening to the chatter on the radio. You don't want to be doing that right now, because there's so much that will mentally tax you. You have so little energy and so little focus, and you actually have less than you normally do because of the battle conditions under which you're having to make decisions. So mental discipline means the discipline to compartmentalize your day. Routine is good. Routine not only for yourself, but routine and predictability for your teams. It could be as simple as a meeting at the same time every morning. And it might be only 5-minute morning, or 5-minute meeting. And the most important part of that is not going to be the business that you discuss. It's going to be the emotional connection that you build, seeing each other on the screen and reminding yourself that you're part of a larger community, right? Humans have evolved to be social animals, but society's moved in the opposite direction. We're a very lonely community, let alone have a COVID-19 crisis on top of this. When humans feel threatened, our brain tells us to come together. So as a leader, you got to make that easy. You got to make that. You got to welcome that. It's not a bother. It's the best thing you can be doing, is to build a sense of community on your team, and that's what leads to my next point. This is about psychological safety. You know, we spend as much time at work. Many of us spend as much time at work as we do at home, not counting when we're sleeping. And so it's your job as a leader to create a sense of safety. And that doesn't mean you deny reality, but business survival is the same as human survival. Human survival, the chances of a human surviving a huge stress or big environmental challenge is they come together. That's how we've survived for thousands and thousands and thousands of generations. So we need to play to that. You know, you want your team looking forward to the morning meeting as a reminder that they have a calmness in whatever the storm this is causing in their life. So this is about empathy, 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 and you're going to hear that from CVR. And guess what? If you're not a touchy-feely person, you better get touchy-feely, right? There's really no virtue right now in having a stiff upper lip. Vulnerability, authenticity, transparency, that's what your employees Sorry for my dog, but that's what your employees hunger for right now. And so don't go back into the corner and be the tough football coach that doesn't show any emotion. That's the worst thing you can be doing right now. And saying, well, that's just not the way I lead. That's not an excuse. These are extraordinary times, and you've got to be extraordinary in your response to what the human spirit and your employees are looking for. No excuse. But again, this is about psychological safety. And this is based upon the literature of what it means to demonstrate good leadership. Now, all this, the mental discipline means that it allows you to avoid, if you're centered, you're going to avoid panic-inspired decisions that lead to unnecessary closure of a business unit. I've been helping the Kelley School has been helping the Chamber of Commerce with small businesses and giving them advice. And our mission, our triage mission, is to make sure that small business owners in Indianapolis, and really anywhere, are not making emotional decisions that lead to unnecessary bankruptcy. There will be bankruptcies that aren't necessary for survival. There are going to be closures of business units that are not necessary. There's actually going to be people laid off that's not necessary, but it was made because of a panic decision. And that's the worst thing that can happen, right? If you have to close a business unit, if a business has to go bankrupt, and that will happen, and there will be groups of businesses like that and enterprises, it should be for objective reasons, not because somebody made a short-sighted emotional decision because they felt overwhelmed by their environment. That would be a needless loss in the economy, a needless loss of jobs, and needless stress on those that are impacted. So the verb I've been using is, this is about hibernation. How do you prepare your business to hibernate? Think of an animal, right? When an animal goes into hibernation, they're not dead, but the heartbeat beats very slowly, right? The blood flows everything slows down to slow motion. So that's the way to think about this, right? And when you hibernate, then when the sun comes back out, you get out of your little hovel and you go see the flowers and see the springtime. That's a way to think here. And I think that's a model to use with your business teams. And in this time, it's important to stay loyal to the fundamental reason why your team gets up in the morning, right? Your business has a mission. Your business has a value that it brings to customers. It solves big problems for customers. It makes life easier. Whatever you do, hold true to your why. Your why stays constant through COVID-19. What you need to be open to and actually almost insist upon is, where do you pivot your what and your how, your processes, your products, the way that you work, the way that you interact, right? You want to have an open mind for that. And maybe even take some risks to discover what these new pathways are. So, but don't question your why, because if you do, your why is why you exist, right? It's why your whole team gets up in the morning. You don't want that to change, but it might be when everybody gets up in the morning, they're doing something different and they're focused on a new product because your customers might have some new pain points. So pivot the how on the what, but don't pivot the why. That will lead to unnecessary chaos in your organization. And that can happen if you lose confidence as a leader in this crisis time. And obviously replace fear with facts. You do have to be sort of clinical with the facts. You might have to lay people off. You might have to close a business unit. You might have a team member who dies of coronavirus, right? Again, there's facts, and then there's the choice of how you deliver it. The worst thing to do is to hide it. Because what starts to happen is if you start to hide bad news, it will actually increase. Delivering bad news with little delay actually reduces anxiety in your team than them knowing you're hiding stuff. because then that raises their anxiety level because they don't know what to expect. And they might think that you're lying. You have to buy legitimacy and be honest and upfront. And you might say, well, we don't want to scare our folks too much, Phil. Well, that might win in the short run, but we're in this for 6 months, right? If we're in this for the long haul, you're going to reduce the anxiety level of your team members if they know that you're honest. And what that does, and that you don't hide anything, is what that does is that allows them to know that no news is good news. Instead of assuming that no news is bad news. That makes the default to be calmness. Whereas if you're hiding information and you lose the trust of your team members, the default becomes anxiety. And that just lowers productivity, and it makes the emotional management challenge of this, both for yourself and for your team members, even higher. So hopefully those are some valuable advice for what we're doing here. So let me just go through some advice we're going on. I've already hit my limit here, so I've got 2 more slides. The rest is sort of more just general business advice that we've been sharing, but hopefully you can translate it back. But I think these 2 slides have been the most important from how do you lead in a crisis. The next 2 slides are how does that leadership translate to some good practice in a crisis in terms of business decision making. How should businesses in general, how should businesses cope with what we're doing? So let me give you 7 pieces of advice here, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. And Kevin's going to kind of be the traffic cop and direct questions my way. But so here's some business decision-making advice. First of all, scale back operations. Economy shrinking, every business is going to scale back, with the exception of some sectors like the grocery stores or delivery or healthcare. But, again, we want to survive. We want to hibernate. That means we scale back the biological activity of the organism. That means we scale back our business activity. So you scale back to a point where you're still earning revenue, but whatever revenue stream you're earning, you want to make sure that whatever variable expenses that you're incurring are less than that revenue. You want to be making incremental money on whatever business that you're still doing. Incremental revenue is wages or raw material or content or keeping the lights on for a day that you're open. Any expense that you're incurring because you're doing business. And that might mean that you have to furlough some employees. That's the bad news right now. Restaurants are doing this, right? A big restaurant that's doing 100,000 a week, they're gonna have to scale back to just takeout, which means instead of maybe a staff of 30, maybe they just have a staff of 5. But whatever expense they're incurring on the takeout, they're at least breaking even on that from the revenue that they're earning from takeout. So scale down. That's the first. Scale down so that the revenue that you're still earning is greater than your variable expense. Next, you want to reduce your fixed expenses by negotiating with your creditors, your bank, your leasing agents, right? Anybody you owe money to, you want to negotiate sort of maybe like 4 to 5 months of lower payments in exchange for higher payments, in 6 through 10 months, right? What a lot of businesses don't understand is that your creditors, your leasing agents have as much interest in you staying in business as you do. And so there's an assumption sometimes that that's non-negotiable, but really it's going to be more negotiable in this type of environment. And obviously too, you want to expand your credit lines, right? You want to draw down on cash reserves to pay your fixed expenses. And if you have some money left, if you've got the ability to borrow, or maybe it's a small business administration loans, which the Indy Chamber is helping our enterprises here in Indianapolis access, or again, just whatever, if it's new short-term credit lines, if you've got some money left over, try hard to keep your core staff. Your core staff, you want them around in the fall when we expect business to really, really take off. And you don't want to miss that because that's your chance to make up for losses that you've incurred these 6 months. If you can't afford to keep your staff, what you can do is make sure they have access to the unemployment, make sure they know how to fill out, and that they do fill out the unemployment application, and that they're getting the more generous government payments that the CARE Act has allowed. The CARE Act is going to basically pay uh, um, employees up to $600 a week now. The limit used to be half that. So make sure that your employees have access to that, and then have somebody on your leadership team call them constantly and just to connect with them to see how they're doing, because they're going to be craving that. And if they know that you care for them, they're going to understand legitimately if you can't keep them employed financially. As long as you keep that emotional connection, you can call them back and you're ready to do business when recovery starts. Number 4, just like you should reach out to your employees, you need to reach out to your customers. And the best way to do that, the best signal so that your customers know that you're empathetic, yeah, you can call them and see how they're doing, but put your money where your mouth is. Lower your price. Proactively offer contracts with lower prices. And it might be contingent upon 6 months from now when the economy's back in flow. That does 3 things. It's a signal, it's a real signal to that you know that your customers are suffering like you are. It keeps a connection, and it preserves a client, and it also makes sure that you have revenue coming in. You're locking in revenue when business comes back, because when business comes back, it's going to come back in a roar. Because again, the economy, nothing was holding anything back in the economy. The economy wasn't holding itself back. It's this public health crisis that was completely external to the economy. Last 3 pieces of advice here. Use downtime. This is sort of an obvious one. Use your downtime to clear tangible and intangible business clutter. Whether it's a hard drive with useless files on it, whether it's an office that's messy, or a control room that needs to be deep cleaned, or equipment that needs to be updated or maintained, or storage room that needs to be organized. Do it now, because all that is going to make you more productive. Mostly because when we reduce clutter, psychologically it makes us more productive. So this is an obvious way to make yourself more productive and to lower your unit costs when business does come back. Again, all part of the survival game. We're preparing ourselves right now. We're going to make sure that we're alive, and everything we're doing right now is to prepare ourselves for the better days that are coming pretty soon. And along those lines, be innovative, be entrepreneurial. It's time to reinvent yourself now. Innovate, innovate, innovate. Your customers in this new reality have new pain points. How can you pivot your how and your what to address those new pain points? And if you're addressing those pain points, even in the midst of the crisis, your customers are going to be willing to pay for it. They might even be willing to pay a premium for it. And they'll know that you've adjusted how you do business to meet their needs. What a great way to deepen long-term customer loyalty. And last and not least, back to gratitude, what I started with. Be thankful for each day that you're not in bankruptcy, or be thankful for each day that your business unit is not completely shut down. It might be in hibernation, which means it's not doing anything right now. There's a difference between hibernating and still being ready to go for business. But be thankful for each day that you're still in business, and then wake up that morning and make decisions that allow you to wake up tomorrow to still be solvent. So, Kevin, that's my, sorry it went a little longer than maybe we wanted to, but I hope this was helpful. And I'm gonna stop sharing here, and we'll open it up to questions. How's that sound?
Sounds good. We have gotten a few questions, so let me get to them. I think the first one is from Ann Merkel at the National Bank of Indianapolis, and she's talked a little bit about the CARES Act, and obviously it's caused extra activity in certain industries like healthcare and even banking. How would you maybe further expand on your hibernation concept? How can that be applied for some industries that are, while revenue is down, their activity is significantly increased?
So I'm not I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on the details of the CARE Act. However, I do know that there is a provision. There's 4 options that Michael Huber's that nicely summarizes in his meetings. But there's an option there where you get money, you get capital from the government, as long as you don't, you still pay your wages. And so I like that option, right? Now that's not going to be an option for the most desperate businesses, but it sort of ties you into, it sort of forces a discipline to keep your folks employed, because the government's not going to give you the money, you fire folk. So I think that I would take advantage of that part of the CARES Act. You've got enough capital. And to keep people, it might be reduced hours. It might be reduced wages, right? But, you know, if you're getting enough capital from the government to keep those folks employed, this is the time to build new culture, folks. And that gets back to intangible clutter. If there's misunderstandings on teams, if there's leadership challenges, misunderstandings, take the time to really build relationships in the organization. That's probably even more effective than cleaning out a messy storage room. And if you look at it, the CARES Act will give those organizations the blessing of being able to call a timeout and to fix stuff that's not working. So I don't know if that's the answer, Kevin, but there's a nice breadth of choices in the CARES Act. You know, talk to your banker, talk to your lawyers, make sure you educate yourself on it. But as an economist, I think CARES Act is awesome. And not just because of the stimulus, but because it does force some discipline back on businesses. And that discipline can be an opportunity to elevate our culture and elevate our business processes. And hopefully that can be applicable for any sector, especially those that have a lot of downtime right now.
I've definitely been on, I think, 4 calls or webinars about the CARES Act in the last 3 days. So I know it's a hot topic among small businesses and the financial industry.
I'm bullish on it. Take advantage of it. And again, I think people need to realize, you know, as Hoosiers, we're very proud of our self-reliance. Get over it.
Yeah.
Reach out and take advantage of these programs.
Yeah, that's a good
Do
point.
it for the community. We want you to stay open.
Another question we got from one of the attendees is, which industries do you think will come out of this the strongest?
Yes. So I think that coming out of 9/11, you know, terrorism and security was our national obsession for a decade. Population health is going to be the new obsession. And I think that's going to be good. So there's going to be lots, healthcare, there's finally going to be enough. You know, if you look at us as a country, we've always rallied in huge crises. Things have changed that we never thought could change. That's going to happen to healthcare. I'm not pretending that we're going to solve all of our problems of access and inefficiency. There's so much to be fixed in healthcare that we're going to see movement in that direction. I think that we're going to see a revival of grocery. I know that's not a big part of the economy, but I think people are going to realize that they've been eating out too much. It's made them sick. And hey, I can actually cook at home. So there's going to be this renaissance in at-home type of food preparation, which could be good for garden and nurseries and seeds and all that kind of thing. I think that with low interest rates, you can actually see coming out of this a little pop in residential real estate. Again, that would be in the latter part of the recovery. And supply chain management and logistics. In a hurry, companies are having to figure out how to do things better. And, you know, before this, we faced a driver shortage and they were still figuring out how to deal with new federal regulations. Well, they've had to figure that out, which means that sector is going to be more productive, which means it's going to be primed to make some money. So just sort of, those would be some healthcare and supply chain logistics are very important to the regional economy here.
Yeah, great. That's helpful. I know our network of agencies is putting together a survey for the home sort of market, because there's a feeling that people, now that they've been spending too much time at home, they're going to rethink their space, their design, their home office, as you said, cooking, because everyone's now cooking. That might really change gardening, as you mentioned. So we also are hearing or feeling that there's going to be a different attitude about your house after this.
Absolutely.
One thing I just wanted to clarify, and I think one of the questions people are asking is how long will this last? And I appreciate your sort of timeline in terms of not necessarily the COVID crisis, but the economic crisis of 3 months in paralysis, 3 months of a slow crawl, and then a rapid rebound. You had mentioned your prediction of about 19 to 24 million unemployed or jobless. I've seen similar numbers, but you know we've hit a record of 6.6 million jobless claims this week, but that number that you put out is significantly larger. Is that because of the timeline of the recovery? There will be more jobs lost. Can you kind of explain that difference?
Sure. I think so here's the stages that I see it in. You'll see a quick downdraft. We're seeing a quick downdraft now in service sector employees. So rapid fall, right? Then we'll hit a stage where you see it's already starting, gradual layoff of white collar workers. This is the business impact, right? The down spike is because consumers aren't going out to eat anymore, or they're not going to entertainment or the movies. But then you have the multiplier effect, the ripple effect, where incomes are going down, and that's going to affect businesses. Even if somebody can work from home, now they're being laid off because their business doesn't have enough revenue. So we're going to have a gradual increase in white collar layoffs. And then what we'll see is we will see some realignment, some hiring. I mean, there's hiring going on in the grocery, in some industries, there's a lot of mass hiring going on. So somebody might do a jobless claim now, but they might be working at the FedEx hub the next week, right? So you're going to see just this huge dip, gradual increase, but then it'll start to recover. After the white collar layoffs, then the service sector will start to go back to work, and those white collar folks will start to get their job back. So it's this kind of weird 4-stage movement, but it'll go down very quickly, very far, but for a very short time. Okay. Assuming that there's not a calamitous second spike in the fall.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that that's not going to happen, which that's debatable whether that's a good assumption or a bad assumption, but I think it's a reasonable assumption.
Yeah. Another question we got from somebody on the line who's at a life sciences company, and I had this yesterday on a call with Elevate Ventures. How would a company in the life sciences industry, which is really actually on fire, it's not business as normal, it's business, tenfold. How do they continue to communicate with customers from an empathetic standpoint, but still recognize that they're in a different situation? They're not laying people off. They are, as you just mentioned, hiring a lot of people.
I would have to imagine that that's probably the toughest position to be in, right? In this market, that you've got people clamoring. It's like clamoring for these life-saving products. And you know that your team is working 24/7 to do their best, but they still can't deliver it. And I'm sure managers on that front line are just not prepared for the emotional burden that they're feeling right now. In many ways, it's the same stress that our clinicians are facing, right? They garb up and they walk into the emergency room or the ICU ward, and they said they just know that they can only do their best. I think that's where doubling down on the mental discipline and the compartmentalization, and you just got to be factual, empathetic, and be transparent. You want to be transparent and show this is what we're doing, folks. I'll give you a tour of the factory. We're going to open up a new section over there. We're doing a new shift, right? You want to be open and reader friendly, or make it easy for people to digest information on how you're doing your best to ramp production up. And that'll win you a lot of confidence in the market, right? But it will take its emotional toll on your teams. And that's where it's really important as a leader, if you're a communication leader, to really support your team and maybe even bring in some professionals to help them deal with the stress.
Yeah. I mentioned yesterday on the phone to another client in a similar situation. I think that you can't talk about your success. You really have to talk about the need and meeting the increased demand from the people who really absolutely need your product or services at this time. And so I think if you're, you don't want to be too proud, I guess, or talk about that success, but you can talk about the demand and meeting the demand. It's back to what you said. It's the why. Why are we in business? And you've created a product in life sciences that is filling a need or demand, and it happens to be, extraordinarily in need today.
Yes, absolutely.
One other question we have is, what somebody in the nonprofit and political space, what do you think will be the net effect from an economic standpoint on nonprofits and on even political campaigns as we get through this recovery? Fundraising.
Very challenging. Very
Fundraising.
challenging. Very challenging. The market was at about 29,000 before all this started. Nice upward pace. People didn't expect this. My colleagues feel that it will bottom between 15 and 20,000. I've been having conversations. I'm actually one of the more optimistic ones. So it means that we haven't hit the bottom in the market. It's going to continue to figure out what's going on. And there's still the fear of a second outbreak in the fall. While that may not slow down business, it's going to slow down investments. So, I've got a development team at IU. What we're doing is we're just reaching out and just talking, making sure that we're making our connection. But it's going to be a tough, while business activity will recover pretty quickly. With one exception, I'll share that exception, but the general philanthropy space or the general political donation space is going to be very stubborn in coming back. What people will respond to, though, what we are seeing is that people are being very generous with relief, with like things that have immediate impact on people's lives, whether that's tipping 100% of the bill, whether that's like right now at IU, we're directing everybody to our student relief fund so that we can maybe pay a student's rent if they're from abroad and or they're from a poor economically challenged area of Indianapolis, keep them on campus. I think people still respond with a big heart. So in your portfolio, if you've got some short-term projects that offer immediate relief for people that are economically challenged, that's where you probably would see actually a higher willingness to give money.
Okay, that's helpful. I think that's all the questions I've seen so far from the group, and I do really appreciate the insights. If there's any other questions, feel free to send them out. But I do appreciate you taking the clinical approach, the non-emotional approach to these decisions. There's a lot of noise out there. I know as a business leader, it's sort of sifting through 200 COVID-19 emails and all the other noise that's out there, and sort of focusing on what our decisions have to be, and not necessarily worrying about the current counts of people who are infected and death rates, even though I have to understand what's going on. I think you've given us a clear path in terms of making decisions that are non-emotional, factual based, and I appreciate that a lot. I do want to disagree with the cutting the price thing, because a lot of my clients are on the webinar. I'm kidding, actually. We've accommodated many, and if there's anybody listening, feel free to call me directly, and we'll figure out a way. We do believe in building this economy. We believe in building brands that matter, and we work with a lot of great brands, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to make sure they survive and then to thrive, because we all hope to come out of this with this rapid recovery that you talked about whenever it occurs.
Yeah, and Kevin, I just think it's important. I'll just leave folks with this point. While we want to make decisions based on fact and on sort of emotional compartmentalization, and this is probably what you're telling your clients too, or maybe in a different way, but at the end, what will increase our probability of success and our probability of survival as leaders and as communicators is to embrace the humanity of all this, right? Yeah. To know that if we can't get back to an email in 24 hours, people are pretty much going to be more forgiving than usual, right? People are going to want more connection than usual. What we feel might be a bother, a lot of times we want to get down to business. That's how we do it in America, right? We get down to business. And right now, people just want to talk. People, they're going to appreciate if you ask about their family. And what a meeting that might take 20 minutes or 10 minutes might take 20 because you're engaging in small talk. You're engaging that emotional connection. And if you do that, that's gonna make you a better business person. Because at the end of the day, we're managers, and we like to pride ourselves on rational decisions with great spreadsheets and cluster analysis and pros and cons and net benefit analysis, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the day, our reptilian brain dominates our rational brain, right? And when we feel threat biologically, we hunger for more sense of safety. And just engaging in emotional connection with whoever you're doing business with, and being a little bit more forgiving of your team members or of your customers or of your suppliers because they're not paying their bill on time. At the end of the day, embracing that humanity and loosening the rules a little bit, you're going to come out farther ahead than you ever thought.
Yeah, that's great. Great advice. Well, thank you all for attending, and we will post this webinar on our website, and we'll send a link to everybody who was in attendance today so you can reference it or share that with team members. So Phil, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Kevin. I wish everybody the best of luck as we go through these unprecedented times. Stay healthy and vigilant.
Yeah, thanks very much. All right,
No
stay
worries.
healthy, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.